Hello, hello. Welcome to the First Mind Podcast. This is episode 12, and I have a very special guest. I'm super excited for this episode. I'm always excited for every episode, but I have Terrie here, who is an intuitive healer. If you've been following along, episode 10, you were able to be introduced to my actual trauma therapist, and we talked a little bit about EMDR. Episode 11 introduced you to a life coach. And now for episode 12, we have another type of coach, an intuitive healer. So we get to kind of hear about that practice and all the wonderful gifts that Terrie brings to the universe. So welcome, Terrie. We are happy to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Uh,
Uh,
so we can get right into it. So
sure,
I wanted you to just maybe take a little bit of time to explain to our audience what actually an intuitive healer is.
sure. Well, I think it's gonna be different for each type of healer. I'll speak on how I intuitively heal. So there are different ways that the brain receives data and information, and it comes out through the senses, the five senses. So my specialty, I guess you can say, is what's called clairsentience, which is like touch and feel. So it's that sense. So when I'm working intuitively, my primary type of communication is sensing or feeling. So I'll get information that is processed through my body. So I'll feel information. So some people who are clairvoyant, they might see the information, right? So there are typically five senses, but then you have that sixth sense of claircognizance, which is just knowing. So I primarily, when I'm working intuitively, I'm primarily using my clairsentience, which is my number one way of communication. And my secondary is clairaudience, which is hearing. So I'll hear information. So when I'm talking about those clear senses, which is what clair means, it's just a way of receiving information and data from energy, the light waves, and everything is made up of energy. It's just that this is non-physical energy. So it moves, the light waves move at a faster frequency that you can't touch it, or it's just not tangible. When it's something slower, like maybe the cell phone, it'll be more of a physical thing. So that's how my brain is processing the information, is through the sense of touch. So I'll give you an example. I have never, thankfully, been stabbed, but when I've done readings, let's say mediumship reading, and maybe somebody passed tragically because they were murdered or they were stabbed, I can feel it in my body. I can even hear the sounds of what my body would sound like getting stabbed. But
Wow.
thank God, in my physical current reality and incarnation, I have never been stabbed. So again, it's a non-physical type of energy.
So I'm so curious about this. When did you learn that you kind of had this ability?
Yeah. Well, that's a big question, because my entire life I've just had weird experiences. My mother has experiences, both of my sisters and my mother's mother. So it kind of runs on my mom's side of the family. I was about 25 years old. I started dabbling with tarot cards, doing readings just for fun. And apparently I was pretty accurate in my readings. I was like, okay, this is fun. So I started realizing I had some sort of purpose with this around the age of 25. And at that point, and our purposes can change and evolve and develop, right? So at that point, I was like 25, I think. I knew that I was here to make people smile. I just didn't know in what capacity, right? Then, when I turned 40, that's when the big stuff started happening. I had my first mediumistic experience, which scared me terribly. I used to be a ghost hunter, paranormal investigator, and I had a spirit enter my body and take over Terrie. But there was Terrie, and there was this spirit whose name was Dick, which we later found out his name was actually Richard. Anyways, to make a long story longer, right? I was probably around the age of 40 when I started to like have these really strange experiences that it wasn't just about my accuracy about predictions. It was like I'm receiving energy, I'm feeling energy. And then basically from my psychism and mediumistic skills, I started taking healing courses, things like Reiki and integrated energy therapy. Right now, I'm pretty focused on pranic healing. So, I'm also being guided. I can feel it towards emotional code clearing. So, a lot of it has to do with emotions, which is just energy in motion. So, everything has to do with energy. So, I kind of consider myself an energy witch in a way, you know?
I
Yeah.
like that. For listeners who are newly hearing kind of this psychism and clairvoyance and like these ideas, um, what I will say is on my journey, I have met who have this gift, if you will. And I think one of the most impactful um, experiences I've had with somebody who has this gift is a woman I worked with, and she could communicate with spirits, but she did not want that gift. Like she did not want
Yeah.
anything to do it's a heavy
It's,
gift, like and that was I think for me, because I think sometimes for us who aren't familiar, it can sound kind of hokey or like we don't really understand. But I think she was a real helpful person in my life because she was spot on about many things. She was just such a wise woman. But the fact that she didn't want the gift made it helped me understand like this is really this is a thing like that people have, this ability
yeah.
because you hear about people maybe who exploited or like are pretending to have this ability, but this was a person who had this gift and wanted not she did not want to profit or even engage. Like she was like, I got enough going on in my life, like I don't want to, so it's just so
Yeah.
interesting. I think, but I'm definitely a believer. I honestly feel like we all have gifts in this way, you
Do.
know
We do.
um and different life experiences bring them out. Like you said, you turned 40 and that really kind of revved up your understanding. I love that you said that your mission is to make people smile. Like how sweet of a life's mission is that? And you do that. Like I told you that before we even got on the
Yeah.
recording, like that's your energy. So that's a beautiful way to see your life mission. But yeah, I just wanted to say to our listeners who maybe are not having heard of that before or
Yeah.
understanding of this kind of work, um, you know, just keep an open mind. And as we proceed with the podcast, we're gonna have Reiki specialists come on. Like you're gonna start to hear about energy work, and that really is what Terrie is defining. Is just her ability to sense energy and to really work with it in a way that can help probably expedite people's,
Yeah.
healing. Yeah. So that is. Go ahead.
I was just going to say what I love, what you're saying right now is kind of explaining to any, people who haven't been exposed to this. I also feel like it's a duty of mine in a way to tell them that they are empowered and to do their research and to get the correct referrals, because just like you said, there are people out there who will prey on your vulnerability, take your money, tell you things that aren't true, but then you're so vulnerable, you'll believe it, and then you actually create it. So I do want to tell anybody who is listening or watching this that to do your homework and trust your gut, trust your instinct. Like if you get a little weirdness, you're like, I don't like that person, go with that. You don't like that. It's about resonance, and energy either attracts or repels. It's that simple. So if you feel like that's a no for you for sure. So I just always feel like it's the right thing to do to let people who may not be familiar with this to do your research, see if they'll even talk to you before, referrals. What have they done on social media? Watch their social media, their interviews, anything like
I love that. I feel like every specialist who comes on kind of gives that advice. Like,
that. Good.
go with your gut. Like really, and I am very mindful also with my intuition. So I
Sure.
really the podcast is a new thing. I've never done a podcast before. This is, the beginning of something that has just become very beautiful. But the way that guests come to me, I feel like has a lot to do with resonating and intuition, and like it always feels very genuine, and I would not comfortably invite a guest or have a guest if I didn't feel like they were authentic or genuine. So I love that every guest that I've had who is in the business of coaching and doing it for a living, because we have to make a living, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
but they all have said, like, even though this is how I make a living, you might not, you might not resonate with my message, and that has to be okay. Like, this is
Yeah.
a journey. Like, figure out what works best for you. So I love that you added that.
Yeah. It's
So
empowering.
yeah, for sure. So my next question is, how do you approach your coaching discipline, and what would a client, for the first time in a session expect from you? Like, what would that look like?
Yeah. So, in my woo-woo-ness, I'm also really practical and pragmatic. I can go a bit rogue. And what I mean by rogue is that, yes, there may be certain ways to do certain things, but I also feel like people have their own intuition and know what's best for them. So if you don't follow the rules exactly, but you find something that works for you that's really practical and pragmatic that you're going to continue doing, I say do it. So when it comes to any of my practices, I go rogue. I always make sure that people in their own growth and evolution, they go rogue because it has to be with that, with what works for them. Piggybacking on that, I like science. I just like science. I like evidence. So my approach, there's light science. I don't want to go too much into the science because I don't want people to get bored. But I feel like if people know why something is happening, they're more apt to continue a behavior or an action. And that's the only way change can happen, is through action. So if you understand energy and the basics, the fundamental of how it works and how you can use it to work for you, then that's where you get the empowerment. And you're using your choice and your sovereignty of how you want to live your life. So there is a very pragmatic and practical, very light sciencey approach. My other approach is no BS, tell it like it is, but with kindness.
Mm-hmm.
I try my hardest. I am not perfect in any way, but I try my darndest and my hardest to live my life with loving kindness. Am I perfect? No. I'm horrible in the car, by the way. If anybody ever drives with me, you will see that I am not loving and kind in the car. That is an area of work that I do need to develop. But being able to hold space and give guidance and also be really practical and pragmatic in a loving way, someone's going to be able to receive that information and then take it and go with it, right? So authenticity, I guess you can say, with loving kindness and compassion. And my sense of humor is very dark. It is naughty. It is, so I have, this morbid kind of sense of humor as well that I bring in, right? So, I mean, that's pretty much my approach. I want what's best for whoever I'm working with. I am on their team. I am able to see things that they can't, or feel things or experience things that they can't. So, what I want to do is just bring that information that they do already know from the back of their head. I want to bring it to their forehead so that they can become more mindful. I work with a lot of people who have anxiety. So, for example, meditation is not like a cookie cutter approach, one size fits all. If you have anxiety, you have to meditate differently in order to get to the place where everybody is sitting in lotus position with some sort of hand mudra. When you have anxiety, you can't do that. Your body is just not sitting still enough, and there's no shame in the game. But that's also an example of how I go rogue, right? It's like, no, you can't do that. So let's figure something out. So I do have different ways. One of my specialties I call heart tapping, which is activating the heart coherence, because the heart is the largest electromagnetic field of the body, and it can, through entrainment, which is basically like, I call it a Pac-Man that gobbles up lower vibrational frequencies just to get you to neutral, right? So I want you to go from anxious, for example, or whatever you're feeling, shame, guilt, to neutral, right? You don't have to go from anxious and shame and guilt to like joy and elation. You can't. Remember, there's that space-time continuum that we talked about. It takes time to move yourself through space because you are physical matter, right? So, my job is to teach you how energetically you can balance yourself to get to neutral. From neutrality, you can go anywhere, right?
This
Yeah.
is so interesting to me, because really what you're describing is very similar to the work that we did in EMDR therapy.
Correct. Correct.
Additionally, we had a life coach on the last episode, and she talked about her work through using psychedelics.
Mhm.
Again, very similar. This idea that we have kind of these repressed cognitions or information that we're just not accessing, and
Yeah.
having a support person to get that information to the forefront of our brain so that we can process it, so that it cannot be so triggering in our body. Like, that's what you're describing, is moving that energy so that you don't have to be in the car and be upset all the time. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, like that is
You
that
will see
yeah,
heart tapping in the car
yeah,
oftentimes. Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. A lot of this, and this is something that people who have been in the spirituality field for a long time, they'll notice that there's these gurus and there's these teachers that are all saying the same thing. It's just that they're speaking it differently. So we're going to talk about resonation again, right? Energy either repels or it attracts. But there are times, depending on where you are in your life and your energetic state of being in that now moment, that you can receive that information differently. So like maybe you heard the Dalai Lama say something over and over and over again, and you're like, yeah, that's cool. And then Monica, you're having a conversation and you just say something that's the same exact thing that the Dalai Lama said. It's just literally different words, and it clicks to that person. And like all of a sudden it's like this huge light bulb goes off, right? We're all saying the same thing. Shamans, healers, psychics, life coaches, at least the ones that have the intention to serve and be of service. I have to add that, just to go back to, there are people who will take advantage. But someone who is authentic, we're all speaking the same language, but using different words.
yeah.
And so that's why each person who receives this information is going to hear it differently from their teacher, their guru, their life coach, their shaman, whoever. But it's all the same thing, which is energy when it comes down to
Yes. I love that. And I love that I am learning on this journey to receive this information from so many different, like, it almost feels like I'm bilingual, if you will, in energy. You know what I mean?
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
I love it. I do. So, okay, if I'm a client, I'm coming, I'm thinking about, I'm having anxiety, I'm going through kind of this um life where I'm trying to figure things out, and I come to you, um what are you suggest, like, what are you going to do for me? Like,
yeah.
what is that? Is there like an intake process? Like,
Yeah.
how do you, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I want to know.
That's a good question, because I don't think I answered that part of the question in the
Yeah,
previous
that's
question.
okay.
So that's great. So yes. So once you've committed and you're like, I'm ready for this transformation and I'm going to, work with you, I will hold your hand. So I actually give in between support. We meet once a week, but there's unlimited in between support. That's what makes my program different than other people's program too. But in the very right before our first session, I do have an intake form for you to fill out because I want to know what your sensitivities are. Do you have any gifts? Do you have spiritual practice? How do you respond to stress? Basically what I'm learning in that is how do you human? How do you
Mhm.
human? Because typically in the first session, what we're going to do is we're going to set the baseline of how you are actually a spiritual being having a human experience.
Mhm.
And I'm going to, in that, the first few sessions, it's more teaching, it's experiential, but it's more teaching. And then, starting from like the fourth session on, that's when we really get into more of the embodiment. But that first session, I'm really going to show you, I'm going to tell you how as humans we get entangled with physical reality and how we can start the journey because it's a lifelong journey, right? You're going to be working with me for 12 sessions, but my job is to get you self-sufficient on your own, be free, right? I don't want you dependent on me. I'm not leaving you if you want to come back, right? But I want to teach you, well, how can I know who I really am? What is my true divine nature? And how do I remind myself of that over and over and over? Because we're going to lose it over and over and over, sometimes 50, 30, 5 times a day. So we have to constantly remind ourselves. So a lot of the work that we do is getting back to basics. Who are you? Understanding who you are not, and then using your human to connect to your higher soul to get in communication so that you can receive, like you were talking about, so that you can receive information and data to make good choices for yourself without being an indecision. Highly sensitive people who are empaths have a lot of anxiety. And so when, as part of like the science-y part of this, is I teach you what anxiety is. And so we break down on just even day to day, because again, we have that in between access. I can know what's happening because if you've been through therapy, just like you and I have, we know this. The breakdowns don't happen during the session, they happen in between the sessions, right? So I want to work in real time with you as much as possible. So, so we're just kind of like looking and saying, well, what's the entanglement? How do I remember? What can I do for my human to redirect its energy so that my higher soul can now start driving?
I
I
love the way you said that. You said it's a way of helping your human um get untangled from the physical. Some kind of way you said like I like the way that you describe that. Like I am a human, right? Having a
Correct.
spiritual experience, but I can get tangled up in this kind of like physical reality and become out of touch with my spiritual center. Like I love the way you explain that.
Yeah, I mean it's something that seems very simple in theory, but it's not easy when you have so much distraction. And just again, when we're going to talk about energy, we have the soul is the non-physical part of us, and then we have our human body. And so they're constantly, you know, getting entangled, right?
And
So
it's yeah, it's also so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Um it's just so interesting to me too, like how many of us look at this kind of language or practice as being hokey, but
correct.
we're all like it's hard to how do you even explain like yourself? Like the fact that you woke up today, that like how do you mean that you are a being, you know what I mean? Like so if that is possible, if this universe has the capacity for you to get up in the morning and like literally go through a day, like you have to kind of understand that there is some sort of spiritual, like some kind of realm of something happening, for that to even be in existence. I don't know. That's the way I look at it. Like
love how you're saying it, because what you're saying it is actually, it's energy based in terms of vibration and frequencies. So how you feel is an emotion. And what emotions are, they're just energy and motion. So here's that science part, right? And these subatomic particles, which is energy, they just move in certain speeds and in certain patterns. That's all they do. They don't have any judgment, and they do it over and over and over again. We as humans have the judgment, right? We have egos, and I'm not going to poo poo the ego, because the ego is designed to save and salvage and protect the human body. So, how do we navigate through life as a spiritual being having this human? Right? So that's what I do. I help you navigate. I help you recognize when you're entangled. I help you shift and change your energy so that you can access those different frequencies like you're talking about. So if you think about like a radio, you have to turn, I know some people are like, radios, what is a radio?
I know
But
what a radio is.
you have to,
We're here. Like yep.
okay, I hear you.
I
I
even
hear
know
you.
what an antenna is and tinfoil on the antenna. I come from way back. Like, so yes.
My people. Um, so you have to tune yourself to a frequency to hear that station.
Yes.
That's what I help you do. Tune yourself to that frequency so you can get that answer to make that big life decision, because it's not going away. Your humanity is not going away until you leave your earth suit. So
I love
why
it.
not learn how to like navigate it? And then when you get really good, here comes the fun part. You can actually manipulate energy so that now energy is working for you. You're not being led by it.
Yes.
And it takes time. I'm not going to sugarcoat. I'm not going to BS. It's not like what I teach you is like, I got this. This is a rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat over and over and over again.
In thinking about empathic people, I went through this phase on my journey where when I initially learned about what an empath was, I was like, I am an empath. And I would shout it to the roof. Like everywhere, every person I met, like, I'm like, I'm an empath. I felt like I could see that in other people. And I'm like, you're an empath. Like I was like this was I loved that concept when I learned it. And then I would say probably a year after learning what an empath was, I started to come across just this message that was like, because of trauma.
Correct.
And it
It's not necessarily a woo-woo
I don't want to
thing.
be it anymore.
I always say, I want off this ride. I want off this ride.
Anymore. I was like, it was in my bio at one time. Like, I am an empath. And then I took that out. I was like, no, I don't want to. So that's so interesting that, you talk about that. Maybe elaborate a little bit more because, I got off of I didn't want to do that anymore.
I hear you. I hear you. And it's actually kind of a controversial topic, if you want to say, in like the spiritual world versus the psychological world or whatnot. But being an empath is about safety. It's about anticipating somebody else's moods, moves, whatever, so that you know how to strategize, so that you know how to go about, survive, live. It's a survival skill. Empathy is pretty much a incarnation of the current lifetime experience or learning, let's say. And you learn it from a very young age, typically because of how caregivers treat you or how do they raise you. So what it does is it gives you a heightened sensitivity. Now, being sensitive to energy is not good or bad, right? When we're talking about energy and those subatomic particles, depending on how fast they move and what speed they're moving at, is going to give different paradigms. It's going to give different perspectives. It's going to give different points of views based on how you are feeling, which is an emotion, again, an energy and motion. So it all still comes down to energy. What empaths do naturally, in addition to the anticipation, is they take it on themselves as yet again another way to survive. Okay. So the woo woo, again, this is the controversial part. I don't know that being an empath is so woo woo, but it's extremely energetic because it does have to do with mindset. There is electricity in the brain and how you feel, which is in the heart, electricity in the heart. That's all energetic based. So, from a spiritual aspect, I guess you can say someone who is just more highly sensitive to energetic shifts and changes could be considered an empath, and as a way for them to survive if for whatever reason in that now moment their brain is deeming something dangerous. They're going to be very empathic about it. But the thing is that can cause a lot of anxiety. And if you are sensitive to shifts and energies, you can use that as a superpower. It doesn't have to be a burden. And most of us are not taught how to use that for us. We experience it as it happening to us, and then it becomes a burden. Right? So then it just goes back to the whole energy thing. I know I'm pissing off a lot of spiritual and, but again, it's a frequency. It's still a way of tuning yourself. So yeah, it is a trauma response.
And I think you, as you're explaining it, are giving me a different reframing. It's been many, many moons since I discovered the language of empathy and being an empath. So I've had multiple, expansions since then.
Sure.
And I'm now in a place of, and I said this to you before we started recording, of just understanding that everything that happens in my life is happening for my greater good. Like, this is the path to my mission. Like, every part of it was necessary, was needed. I'm manifesting the experiences, whether I choose to label them good or bad. I'm manifesting them because I need them. So as you're explaining kind of how we become empaths, it is even helping me to reframe, like, just my understanding that happened, which is really what put me in alignment with my high sensitivity, right? And so the reason why, when I first heard that and then, learned that it was a result of my trauma, and I was in the early stages of trying to really reconcile with the trauma that I had experienced, to me, I didn't want to have this thing, this
Yeah.
sensitivity that was leading me, and I'm not able, like, no, you can learn to
Yeah.
use your sensitivity. You can learn to use your empathy and even your energy and manipulate it in a way so that it is guiding your life and it is working for you. And I think that when I first learned of what an empath was, that is not my reality. Like, it was causing a lot of anxiety in my body. It was making me people please. I was not using that, power, because it really is a power, in the right way, and it was overwhelming.
Yeah. So, empaths, a lot of empaths, they're perceiving things as if it's them. So a way to manage that or deal with that is differentiation, right? So one of the exercises I'll teach is super cheesy and super corny, is like, I'll just tell people to go out in public and literally say, I am not that woman walking her dog. And that's it. I am not that paper bag that man is holding, right? People, places, things, circumstances, situations, right? Being an empath and not having the ability to manage or regulate it becomes an extremely painful situation. And what pain does is it gets you to give up. It gets you to surrender. Once you can surrender, you can start rebuilding. From there comes compassion. So now when you see somebody else people please, or you see them act like a doormat, or you see them whatever, your heart opens for them because you're like, I've been there. I know the pain. So ultimately, when you want to help somebody out of that pain, like even you just having this podcast, there are people you probably are aware of, that you're helping, but what about all the people you don't know that you're helping even yet, right? Because it's a podcast, it's living. So, like a year from now, people could be listening to this episode and you're helping them then. I love the whole time travel thing. But my point is that without having the pain, you cannot find the compassion to serve and help others. And that's where it becomes spiritual.
Oh, Terrie, I could talk to you all day. That's so beautiful the way you put that. Without having the pain, like the pain is what connects you to your compassion, your
Right.
empathy. And that is the truth because, you know, a large part of my journey and what I talk about is the mother wound, right? But there was a period of time where I was very angry, like, because for 40 years, I didn't even know I had a mother wound. So then when this, came up, I was like, what the, like, so I was very angry with my mom, angry with just the way things had, you know, were going in my life at that time, our relationship. And then I started to dive into this work, right?
Yeah.
And this work is heavy. Like it is a lot. Like it is a lot of work. So it really, and I have
Yes.
daughters, right? I have I feel like, the universe has been very strategic in giving me girls, my girls have girls. Like it is like the universe wants me to do something with healing women, right? So um as I'm going through this journey of trying to like reconcile my own trauma, I'm also starting to understand the trauma I created for my daughters, right? Like, and I'm trying to repair and heal and do all, and it occurs to me like I understand why people just don't do the work. Like it started to make sense to me. Like like people who are stuck, I just no longer have judgment of because
No.
sometimes even I say on my own journey, sometimes I'm like, I don't, it was more blissful to be ignorant. Like
Oh,
ignorance
yes.
was
That is a very true saying. I'm like, can I back, please? Can I please go
because
back?
once you know, you can't unknow the
No.
thing, right? So like once you have this information, it's like it's like you have to do something with it. So yeah, that journey of the pain I felt and then trying to go through the healing of that pain and realizing the pain that I caused to other people and just wanting to have compassion for myself is really what equipped me to have compassion for other people and where they are in their journey. And I'm so much more less judgmental
Yes.
because of that.
Yeah, that's the compassion. And that's also loving kindness. When you allow somebody to be who they are, there's a karmic repercussion for that, which is because you're allowing somebody to be who they are. So therefore, they can step into themselves. So
I love that.
karma so often is seen as like this negative thing. Well, you got it, but look what you're giving. And it's in giving that we receive back. There's a whole lot that goes into that, some universal laws. But the thing is that you're allowing someone else to step into themselves and elevate themselves. So you will karmically be gifted in a positive way. Well, in this case, it's positive.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, we are labeling these experiences based on our humanness. So what I'm calling things bad and good and giving them this label, but they're all necessary. Like it just all is what it is. It is just things that, have to happen for me to become who I'm becoming.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's beautiful the way that you frame that. Thank you. That gave me some insight too into my own journey. So I want to talk specifically about just what it is that you do. I know you have some strategies, some tools, and some tips that you provide for people who maybe are feeling inundated with anxiety, overthinking, kind of moving in the world from a place of fear as opposed to, a place of really expanding and understanding their gifts. I wanted you to kind of give, your insight as to what you recommend for people who are struggling to do.
Well, I always recommend tending to the human first. before you tend to your higher soul. The reason being is, again, I don't want to say that we're trapped because I don't think that's a lovely word, but we are bound by earthly ways, because in this now moment, we are wearing an earth suit. So therefore, we do have to follow some earthy things. And so we cannot bypass them. And a lot of us love to bypass and go straight to all the, like, what I would call light work. We got to do the earth work first. Got to tend to the human first, because that actually is a huge factor as to why we're here. We need the human to elevate the soul. So without having awareness and mindfulness of the human, the soul can't upload that data. Or let's say the higher soul, that data can't get uploaded and then used for future, or have whatever it's stored from past, right? So first thing we have to do is tend to the human, and there's various different ways to do it. But once, when you have anxiety, the brain and the body are just going. So if you can go ahead and you can ease or relax or calm down, I'm not even going to say that. I'm going to say neutralize. I like the word neutralize because to me, that's way less judgment free. Like calm, what's your definition of calm? What's my definition of inner peace? Like screw that. It's about being neutral. So we want to neutralize the human first. Then once we've neutralized the human, then we can start tending to the higher soul. In particular, I work with a meditation specifically for people who have anxiety who can't sit still. And they're just more active meditations. That's it. So they are focused on tending to the human first. So sometimes also tending to the human means being brave and courageous and doing something that, might be out of our realm of the familiar and scare us. So sometimes we have to take risks, right? But we can have the support of the higher soul, but it's the human actually doing it. So when I'm working with somebody, they're highly, highly motivated to either get something or feel a certain way. And the only way to do that is to sort of deconstruct the deep, dark energy, which is stored in the human body. And so we do have to tend to the human first, which is why things like trauma therapy is way better to do than just regular therapy. My personal modality of using my drugs, my modality is neurofeedback because I have CPTSD. So neurofeedback for me, you hook me up. Again, it's sciencey. So I'm like, but I've done EMDR and I love that too. Love that too. But for me, the anxiety part, hey, look at that. God's like, yeah, you got it, girl. Thanks. It's nice to know I got that validation and confirmation because I've been doing it for 3 years. I'm like, but I can really, I'm like, okay, at least I know I'm, didn't waste that time. But yeah, so find a modality that you like, but you can't necessarily go into go straight to the Reiki healing. I mean, you can try. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying it's a tool. Crystals, a tool. Dowsing, a tool. Psychics, a tool. You cannot avoid the human. You always have to start with the human. Always start with the human.
Yes, I've never really heard anybody say it the way you just said it, but I'm thinking about so many people who I know who are invested heavily in crystals, in even Reiki, like those kind of, but they haven't addressed their human trauma, if you will. And so they're not moving in the way to heal that they, would want to, or as, at the speed, if you will, that they would want to. And probably are just kind of, I don't know, like stuck and plan. I think what happens is the crystals and kind of, like you said, the light work, it makes you feel good. Like it gives you this kind of, in the moment feeling of joy or something. But you're right. Like if you haven't healed yourself at the core, it's not sustainable. Like that feeling is not sustainable.
Yeah. So, I mean, we ideally the best way to navigate being a human is to be able to trust and have faith that God, source, creator, your higher soul, whoever, whatever higher power you believe in is walking with you instead of every once in a while showing up and then leaving. And then you're like, then that's when you get into prayer, right? And then you're like, I need you, and then come back and then leave. So ideally, what you want to be doing is building that relationship so that they're always there, right? So again, it does take time. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It does take time, but you know, not having that non-physical support and then going to it just when you need it for that fix, if you want to call it, for that
Mm,
fix, that's why it's not sustainable.
yeah. I even think about people who rely heavily on their faith or church. Like
Same thing.
I know people who are like they go to church every Sunday, maybe even in the middle of the week, like they're on every board.
Yeah.
But their faith is not that strong. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And so I think that speaks to what you're saying, which is
Yeah.
like, yes, like you absolutely, can have your faith and lean on your faith. But again, I think that humanness, that those trauma experiences or that shadow work can get in the way of you really, having a connection with whatever that spiritual, whatever your
Yeah.
belief is. Like it gets in the way.
Yeah, you need balance. I mean, there are some really, really like affluent people out there who are just miserable and unhappy.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
all the money in the world is not going to solve your problems, right? Because there's no balance. The scale is tipping more towards money than it is like love, joy, faith, playfulness, all of those things. So it's always about balance. Mind,
Mhm.
body, spirit, mind, body, spirit. Again, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat.
Yes.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's key. That's how we navigate this human thing because like I said, until we leave our earth dude, there's just no way around it. No
Yeah.
way.
I think in my life, it's very clear to me that I have an abundance of money and resources and like like that is clear to me. Whether I'm living that reality, like it is very I feel that in my soul and in my spirit. And again, to speak to everything has to happen the way it has to happen.
Correct.
I am very clear that I did not come into a physical, monetary financial gain earlier on this journey because I would have squandered it. Like I would not have had the healing of my humanness to sustain that, like, so it makes sense to me that all of this is starting to now gain traction as I heal. It heals so many different parts of my life. I get downloads all the time about business strategies and ideas and different things I can do. And even that requires, me healing some of the self-worth stuff so that I know that I have the confidence to even, actually actualize the ideas and the downloads that I'm getting. So yeah, I love the way you explain that.
Yeah. I mean, I have yet to find a magic pill. I promise if I do, I will share it with everyone and anyone. But we can't escape this. We just, it's hard. It's not easy. And there's always going to be something because
Mhm.
we're always leveling up because our consciousness is always changing.
Yes.
So when our consciousness change, our perspective and point of view is going to change too. So the key is just to be resilient, emotional resilient through balance of mind, body, and spirit. We're not taught how to do this though. So that's kind of where I come in. I'm like, let me show you that you can, and this can be a superpower. It doesn't have to be a burden. Yeah.
Oh, Terry, you are doing such great work in the world.
I hope
Um,
so.
you know you are. You really are. I'm so glad that we connected and like I had the opportunity to share you with other people so that they can, start to hear this message too. Because like you said, And I've not thought about it this way, but the podcast is a living, breathing thing that could, somebody could, like get information from later. I've never thought of it like that, but that's a beautiful way to put it. So yeah, I'm so glad that we're getting this knowledge out to people,
Yeah.
even people who maybe aren't really necessarily on board yet, because I've had many messages that have come to me before I was ready. And I
Mhm.
remember, like, Eckhart Tolle is one. Like, I started reading The Power of Now 10 years ago, and I kept putting it down because I'm like, there's something in this book that is going to make me too powerful. Like, I can't, like, I'm not going to be,
No,
like,
I hear you.
that
That
fear of
fear.
your own
Yeah.
power. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love that. And then I know you had mentioned, like, you had like kind of a strategy or a tip that you give clients or recommend. Was there something that you wanted to share, like in a moment, maybe when I'm having that trigger? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, what is something that you recommend that I do?
Sure. So the first thing that I teach my clients is the heart tapping, which again, it activates the heart center, the largest electromagnetic field. So wherever we place our attention and our focus, that's where our energy is going to go, right? But as folks who have anxiety, where does all of our energy go? Outside of us. We're worried about this. When is this going to happen? Who's going to be part of this? It has nothing to do with us. So the first thing to do to relax the human is to collect your energy back. So,
Mm.
how do you do this? Very mindfully and consciously, pragmatically, practically. If we know that wherever we're placing our attention and our awareness, that's where our energy is going to go, let's bring it to the heart. Because what's happening is that the brain is going, oh, look, her hand is on her chest. That's where we're going to bring our attention. So we are now attentioning like that.
Yeah.
We're now attentioning our heart, and then we can activate it by tapping on it so that the electricity of the heart starts to come into what's called coherence, which is like even waves.
Yeah.
So the first thing you want to do whenever you're triggered by anything, and you will, even if you're not consciously aware of it, your body will just feel out of sorts. You can just start tapping on your heart. That's it.
I'm
Now I
going to
know,
tap with you.
yeah.
I've heard a lot about tapping, but I've never done it.
So yeah, so tapping the EFT tapping, there's different meridian points, which is great. This in particular, I'm like a very heart-based person because
Mm-hmm.
the heart has neurons in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's brain cells. So that means there's an actual intelligence to the heart. And it can emit a field of up to 6 feet past the human body. So that means someone is going to feel you before they see you. So if you're all what scattered, guess what they're feeling?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the first thing we want to do is always just bring our energy back to us. That's it. Remember, we want to tend to the human. So our brain is going, oh, okay, she's touching her heart. That's where we're going to place our awareness and our attention. We can go even deeper now into that by placing our awareness and our attention on our heart. So now we're bringing even more energy in.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, here's the thing is that, and a lot of people don't know this, is we actually have very strong energy. There, wait, in the camera. Energy centers at the tips of the fingers. So when we're tapping, we don't want to actually tap with the tips of the fingers. See, God's like, yes, make sure they know this, right? Um, because you don't want it. The heart muscle itself is a very delicate muscle. We don't want to put too much energy into it. We can actually give ourselves high blood pressure, and that's a no. So if we use the pads of our fingers, we're not over energizing it, but we're energizing it enough. We want to waken up, we want to wake that heart up, but we don't want to over stimulate it. So you just do this. I always tell people, just set an alarm on your phone for 1 minute. Close your eyes to shut out physical reality, breathe into and out of the heart. And even in just 1 minute, you'll start to feel the human neutralize more. Right. So that can just be, like a practice that you do. Eventually what's going to happen is as you build the time, the length of time over that space of time that you're practicing, you can even just leave your hand here. Same process. You've trained through neuroplasticity. Like, okay, because I'll be on a date. If I'm on a date and I'm nervous, I'm like, oh my God, this human needs to calm down, right? So I'll put my hand on my heart. Oh, really? Oh, very feminine energy, right? But
Mhm.
nobody knows what's happening except me. And I'm calming down and then I'm able to receive whatever. So sometimes when, if I'm speaking in a crowd or something, or sometimes I'm doing a podcast or whatever, and I get nervous, I'll just start putting my hands. No one says anything about it because I'm not specifically drawing attention to it. So it again takes practice, but that's a quick little something that I can, share with your audience. Hopefully I described it for those who are listening as well. But I just call it heart tapping. You're activating the energy of the heart to kind of gobble up lower frequencies that don't feel good just to feel better than you did a minute before. That's it. That's our goal.
If you are watching, I am doing this along with Terrie, and I will say, like, I do feel a calmness, like, as I'm tapping my heart. So I definitely recommend trying that. I have not done tapping before, but yes, and I love that we can train ourselves to, like, make that connection so that, it happens more readily. I really appreciate that. I do wanna ask you a question. I had a thought as you said that, speaking of dating, right? So, do when, I maybe you can help reframe this for me. So, I feel like when I am in close proximity with somebody, um, and feel anxious,
Yes.
they're not a good person for me to be around. Am I misunderstanding that or misreading that? And sometimes, Terrie, I talked about this in a post. I will come around certain energies and instantly get sick to my stomach, like have to go like to the bathroom. Um, so that I have been able to kind of understand like through it happening so much that oftentimes those are people that I was not supposed to be around. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm just curious what your thoughts are because I could also see the other side of it where my humanness is making me anxious. Like it might not be this person per se, but an experience I had with this gender, if we're talking about dating, that could be
Correct.
impacting my, anxiousness. So what's your take on that?
Yeah. So, first of all, at its most basic, energy either attracts or repels. And that takes seconds. Like, not, there was a book back in, I think, the 90s called Blink, I think, where it was like you blink in a second and you'll know whether you're attracted to that person or not. And attraction doesn't have to be like a sexual or sensual thing. It's just, I resonate, like, So oftentimes you'll notice that, like for you, for example, it showed up as like you got a stomach ache. So it shows up for you in your stomach. But sometimes people will just take a step back or they'll lean in, right?
Mm.
And you bring up some really good points because our trauma will cause us triggers. And because that energy has been in the body for a very long time, it's the first inclination, but it's not necessarily the truth. So, what you need to learn how to do before, let's say, is to learn how to calm the body down and to also mentally, maybe in a way, have a conversation with yourself and just go, okay, I'm feeling this way, right? So I know I'm feeling this way, but I want to seek out more evidence. I need to collect more data and information to know if it's true because my body is responding and there are different levels of truth. My body is responding because A, we may not be good for each other. Energetically, our energy fields just may not mesh. So that's a truth. B, I could also be making an assumption based on past experiences. So it's kind of like we have to collect and gather and data and information and be like dating PIs, right? Because the thing is, again, everything takes time. As what anxiety is going to do is it's going to tell you, it's going to lie to you, it's going to say, I need to know right now what is happening.
Mm.
And that may not be the truth. I'd say most of the time it's actually not the truth, which is why people who have anxious tendencies need to slow down in their dating. They've got to collect data and information.
Mm.
For somebody who has anxiety, information is like medication. It will soothe the nervous system. And it's only until your human is neutralized that you will know whether this could be a good match or not. And guess what? That takes time.
I agree with that so much. Just give a little disclosure here. Like, so the last time I was in a situation with masculine energy, I didn't feel anxious, but I have an anxious attachment style, right? That I'm working to heal through. So if you are not aware of your attachment style, there's a test you can take on my page, like so that you can determine your attachment style. But we had actually just done the first episode of the podcast, which was all about attachment styles. A psychologist came on and explained all the attachment styles. So we had this test. So I'm with this man, and I'm talking about this new podcast I started and this episode, and he says, I would like to take that test. So he takes the attachment style test, and it comes out that he is dismissive avoidant.
Of course.
Let me tell you something, okay? I like nothing intimate happened with this man. I left. We hung out for the whole night. I left. He didn't call for 2 weeks, right? Normally, because of my attachment style, that would make me like anxious, right? And it becomes about
Yeah.
me. Like it's something I've done that made this person not want to engage with me. The fact that I had the information that he was avoidant dismissive, I didn't have any anxiety about this at all, because what it did is it helped my brain understand that this is not about you. This is how this human is functioning in the world. Like this is every, person that he meet. Like this is who he is. So
Yep.
that took that, pressure, if you will, off of me and my ego wanting that to make it about something that I'm lacking. Because that's what I feel like my anxious attachment style is. It's centered around self-worth. So you're right. Like that information of, just that added little information of like, yeah, he has this kind of attachment. That's why he don't call nobody. Like, that helped me
Yeah.
make sense of something that has happened to me, I'm sure, a number of times in my life. Like,
Oh,
so
because that anxiety is like, the anxiety is really creative. It's very creative energy, and it's going to create all these stories that are not even true, all because it wants to feel like there's a sense of control. But that, again, doesn't necessarily mean it's the truth. So that's why the best way, I heard this, who was the attachment specialist? Adam Lane Smith. I don't know if you listen to him or not, but he was saying that an avoidant and an anxious person could totally get along just fine as long as you understand the operating systems. But he said something like, in order for that to work, an anxious person has to really learn how to self-soothe so that the avoidant doesn't feel like they're being smothered. So what he was saying was that the anxious person has to do the work first, not the avoidant. Well, that's information, right? So I'm like, oh, so I'm in the situation where I'm talking with somebody, and again, same thing with the texting, and it's like, no, Terrie, you need to balance and regulate yourself first. And just knowing how energy works and all the experimentation, if we're going to do an experiment, boom, within seconds, I hear from him. So, I mean, this is like, it is magical. All of this stuff is magical when we deal with it from the human and then the soul perspective. But this attachment stuff is real. It is real and legit, and it gives us information.
What you said at the beginning about that pain story being necessary, well, not necessary, everybody, you don't have to go through these things, but because that experience happened to me and I have this pain that I can tap into, it really is like what has informed my whole life's practice, like what I'm doing in my life. You know what I mean? Like it's made me the best counselor. I worked with adolescents for years. I still have connections with kids. Like all of that shadow hard stuff is really what has equipped me to do the work that I do. So I really appreciate you framing it to me in that way. And even with just our last example of dating and anxious attachments, and you saying like I'd never had it framed in the way that like I needed to work on myself to be a good match for an avoidant, but more so like just my understanding that all of this is about myself. Like all of this is about regulating myself. Like any experience I'm having. When you said that our energy field is 6 feet out, like people can feel my energy 6 feet away, like that is a clue to me. Like I have to make sure, that I am good when I'm
Yeah.
going out in the world, because people pick up on that energy, right?
Yeah.
Like, so if I'm anxious in my spirit and people who are clued in to read that, they absolutely could prey on or take advantage, of that anxiousness.
Yeah. Yeah. So that reminds me of something else that I could add because I left this part out. It is very important is that because we do have an energy field, we do have to take care of our energetic hygiene, right? So if people are going to feel you, you want to feel attractive to them, not repulsed. And I'm not talking about in terms of sexuality or,
Mhm.
romantic or whatever. We're talking just like human to human. Right. So that is one of the things that I do. Like we tend to the human and then we tend to the non human, but I do teach you how to clear your energy field and how to clean it and then maintain it on your own.
Yeah,
Right. So
because
that,
yeah, without like you said, it doesn't have to be romantic. When I
right.
go out in the world and I'm operating at my highest high, the whole universe opens up to me. Like it's like restaurants are free, like everything, like it's like the whole world is like, girl, what do you need? We'll give it to you on a silver platter. Like when I'm operating at my highest high and people who are around me, they've seen it. Like
Yeah.
the whole world opens up. Like so you don't just do that for the sake of finding a romantic partner. That truly is a practice that you can incorporate into your life that will open up expansion in every aspect of your life.
Yeah. Exactly. But it takes balance. Again, I'm going to go back to it takes balance of mind, body, spirit.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Terrie, this has been wonderful. I do want to give you an opportunity to kind of just let our listeners know how they can get in contact with you, how they can keep up with you and follow you, and just get to know more about Terrie and all your wonderful offerings.
Thank you. Yes, yes, yes. Well, first of all, you can find me on my website, terriehuberman.com. I'm also on Instagram. My handle there is intuitive Terrie Huberman. Let's see, how can we work together? I've got that 12-week transformation program called Soul Intelligence. I have quick one-to-one life guidance sessions or for energetic temperature checks, energy clearings, all the things. I do have an online course to help you clear your heartache if you've recently gone through a breakup. I'm excited because I have coming up soon, I have a membership program where once a week we're going to be meeting live. We'll do energy clearings, we'll be doing group coaching, all the fun things like that. And this I'm super, super excited about. But since my baby at heart are heart tapping meditations, I decided to start recording some of those. So I'll be selling those. But your best bet is really to get on my mailing list so that you can know when these will be launched and all the things. Yeah,
I'm
thank
so
you.
excited for you and this work that you're doing. I recently came across a podcast and a similar journey that this woman is having. She was a lawyer and now is helping women, become their best selves. But one of the things that she said is just, Terrie, when you touch a soul like me, like that empowers me to go touch another soul. And then that soul touches another soul. And it's just like this beautiful way of like healing the world that I don't think that we necessarily really understand fully or get at least, always give ourselves credit for. Like just, you know, I'm just grateful. I'm grateful to have people like you come into my life and then be able to share that with my listeners so that they also can can hear your message and take it and expand. So thank
Well,
you for, yeah. Yeah.
thank you. I appreciate you too.
Yeah.
We got to stick together, right?
Yes.
Stick together and share. And yeah, so I appreciate you doing what you do too, because it is really important. It is
Yeah.
important since a lot of people now are starting to wake up to different ways of thinking. It's just nice for them to know there are options for them, to get some sort of education or, learning, somehow, somewhat in whatever capacity. So thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you for being here. And thank you all for listening and tuning in to another episode of the First Mind Podcast. This is the first episode of this month, and we'll have one more in 2 weeks coming up. So I will see you all then. Thank you, and let's heal. Bye-bye.